There is no pre-human world. Not one environment remains unaffected by our activity, even if humans have never set foot there. Keweenaw, at Michigan's boreal tip, has been exploited for its richness of lumber and minerals for about 7,000 years. Not until European settlement did that exploitation escalate from a position wherein humans are but one of many components to an environment entirely altered and dominated by humans. Nowadays, while the logging industry is still profitable, Keweenaw is covered once again in forest. But this is a new forest, a fledgling forest, that is consequence of our lack of respect for this land. However, there is one plot of 500 acres in Keweenaw where we can glimpse what it might have been like before us.
Any filming I do for this trip is going to be on my phone because my camera is highly water sensitive. We're heading to Estivant Pines, so pretty much all this forest that you see around you right now, this has all been logged before. Almost the entirety of the Keweenaw Peninsula was logged in order to build mines in the towns and the ports that would service them. Estevan Pines is one little tiny patch of pine forest that never met the axe, so we're gonna go explore it. So while we have thick forests all over Keweenaw Peninsula today, it is not the same, because not only were the forests themselves destroyed, but many of the abiotic factors were also degraded or disrupted to a point of requiring a whole new succession, a whole new ecological succession from one stage onto the next. That's because when the miners went down, they have to pull up all these sands and soils called stamp sands from the depths of the earth that are completely sterile. They have never undergone any kind of biological enrichment. And most of the nutrients that are locked within them cannot be used by plants alone. They require the fungal and microbial populations to break them down into chemicals that trees, ferns, and forbs can all use. Without that process, you cannot get the same forest back. You might get a new one. And that's what we're looking at now. This is not a remnant forest. This is not even restored. This is an entirely new succession. This is not the forest you would have seen 200 years ago. But somehow it works. It's slowly, gradually finding its own function. It is slowly, gradually finding a new function that we get to observe. We get to witness it. And if you come here in 100, 200 years, this forest will not look the same because it is in the very early stages of that transformation, of that succession. So if you come back here in 200 years, there will be a whole new dominance. Almost everywhere you go, it's going to look a hell of a lot different. And the trees, of course, will be much older. So now we're going to go to one of the last places in all of Michigan where we can actually see what this forest would have looked like, kind of, 200 years ago. And have a reference point for what is happening to this forest in relation to what we had before. So let's go witness this transformation.
Here it would be prudent to address the ecological state of Keweenaw as a whole. Those stamp sands I mentioned, their impact is much greater than just sterilizing the soils they cover. Stamp sands are full of mineral ores, especially copper. Keweenaw yielded the world's purest of it. And with a bit of time, these heavy metals leach out and begin to poison the environment. As humans, too, are a part of their ecosystem, they are not spared the toxicity. The excess of sands continue to spread from where miners deposited them. Wetlands and riparians that control floods, clean water, store carbon, process nutrients, and provide key habitats are filled with poisonous sand. That sand makes its way to Lake Superior. Way into Lake Superior. Spawning sites for the fish upon which American industries and Indian sustenance depends are smothered. Beaches wither away. In addition to the ongoing forestry, which is much better practiced now than in the mining days, and the sheer dominance of invasive forbs and grasses, this is not natural succession. This is anthropogenic succession. We witness here the development of an environment undeniably wild, but fundamentally and irreversibly altered by human interference.
Here on the first trail of the preserve, we're already seeing some very, very old eastern white pines. But around us primarily, we seem to transition in and out of this newer secondary succession, wherein we have a competition that is yet to be determined. We must wait decades, perhaps centuries, to see who really wins out. But we've got many specimens of, there we go, the Douglas fir. That's Albias balsamea, not Douglas fir, balsam fir. We also have a lot of paper birch, that's the Betula peperifera, and a lot of the unique UP subspecies of sugar maple, Acer saccharum. They all appear to be competing. We also have a few red oaks, Quercus rubra. A quick homage, they do a lot of these plank paths throughout the Copper Harbor area. And I love them because not only do they prevent erosion, sure they're a little slippery, but they prevent erosion. Over time they will decay and it'll be as though nothing was there. And they don't disrupt the root systems or the mycelial systems of plants or fungus respectively. They also keep cold-blooded critters from sunbathing on the trail, discourages them at least, and allows burrowing little mammals and whatnot to make safe passage underneath it. So, yeah, it's a little more time consuming to build, but it's much, much better in the long run. Oh yeah, and they allow water to, they don't disrupt hydrological function. Doesn't that figure? We're just getting into one of the old pine groves here, though. Some of the beautiful fungal colonies that perhaps predate human settlement here. And some of the beautiful pine trees that certainly predate human settlement. For about 300 years, these trees provide many different uses for many different organisms throughout their life. As they age, only in their oldest age can they transcend from providing mere habitat and food to birds and rodents. With age, they can begin to provide habitat for uncountable microbial and fungal colonies. And these colonies can take up an immense proportion of the mass of that tree, living inside of it and a little bit outside of it. And as the tree continues to harbor more and more of these unseen guests, these unseen tenants, I should say, they become more and more useful to some very conservative, very specialized species, such as owls, pileated woodpeckers. So when this magnificent monarch turns into more of that magnificent monarch, its function does not decrease whatsoever. So we have the snag pine, that is a dead but still standing pine, and this thing now provides habitat for animals that could not access it before, and also it will continue to be able to transmit signals, to send nutrients, to send, even use the mycelial system, the mycelial internet, if you will, between itself and neighboring pine trees to continue to communicate and utilize the nutrients that are locked within this wood so that its kin can benefit from its death. And we have this piece which fell down onto the ground. And here we get to see that, all that white stuff, that is mycelium. That is the fungus, the body of the fungus, which could very well be as old as the tree. Oftentimes older as it populates the roots and the soil underground. But every time one of these massive, massive old trees falls, it creates an entirely new kind of succession. I mean, think about it. There's been about 300 years in this exact spot of a great big pine tree, shading it, locking its soil in place, completely dictating the flow of nutrients and energy. Now it has died and fallen. It has created a small clearing. And for the first time in a few centuries, different kinds of plants, different kinds of organisms have an opportunity to succeed in this environment. I'm glad to have a chance to show you, actually, down here in this ravine, we have the remnants of a cedar swamp, and they dictate a lot of the hydrological chemistry, a lot of the water chemistry, and all the regimes here of different bodies of water are often greatly infected with the tannic acid content leached from these swamps. This one is finally past, and it's leaving behind a gradually expanding marsh with the advance most strongly capitalized upon by bulrushes, which is all this grass, and willows, which are all these little shrubs. Alright, checking in. I think I'm like halfway. Yeah. Halfway. This is why no one invades Scandinavia. Alright. Oh. I mean, look at the size of it. These used to be very common trees, but they require a lot more time, many more centuries of succession to become dominant in their environment. That's why you don't see so many of them anymore. But as far down as the lake shores north of modern-day Chicago, on the Illinois coast, you would quite frequently see them. Now we are come to Cathedral Grove. I have not seen pine trees like this since Del Monte Forest over on the Monterey Peninsula. But they're everywhere here. We walk among the kings of a country twice as old as our own. And truly they are the kings. They dictate everything about this environment. They are the keystone species of this whole ecosystem. And to think that just about 40 years ago they tried to destroy them all. You don't get that back. Just like we've seen with the rest of Keweenaw. You don't get it back. These organisms here are not only in and of themselves incredibly intelligent and ancient, not only do they communicate with each other and a select but diverse variety of other species in this forest using the mycorrhizal, the fungal systems within the soil to transmit nutrients, to share chemical knowledge between one tree and another. All you have to do is remove the trees and that whole system collapses. And you'll notice all the Douglas firs here are very young. They don't get very old. They don't succeed very easily here. The sugar maples do because they have a habit of shooting straight for the sky. They don't put out any horizontal growth for their first few years. They'll just shoot vertically. The spruce trees, though, have a very uniform habit of growth, and that might actually inhibit them. They can't grow fast enough to get to the same height as the maple trees do, and the birches. But if I see anything else really cool, I'll stop and show you guys. I think I got you the gist of it. I could ramble and ramble. I could sit here and wax poetic, and I probably will, but I'll do it on my own time. I won't make you guys listen to me. I just wanted to get the uninitiated initiated to the world we have created, as well as the world that we left behind. All right, come to Keweenaw, folks.